Before that, there was a conference in Oklahoma City. This would have to be in the early 70s, 73, 74, somewhere there, I think. And I presented a paper at the OBTC, the Organizational Behavior Teaching Conference, maybe. And it was the second of these conferences in the world. There had been one before it. It's now one of those established and institutionalized organizational systems, really, and boring to the nth degree now. But at that stage, part of the research work that I was doing for my master's degree in organization was, or master in management, whatever, and I did all of my work by research, not by coursework. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was good, maybe it was bad, but it seemed right and it was fascinating. And part of that was presenting this paper, which was working on some of the work that Bruce Juhl had done, and he'd been invited to present at this conference, but he couldn't be there or chose not to be. So I was his non-diplomat or delegate or something like that. And we used the work of Jim Thompson, which was from the University of California, at one of the many campuses of the University of California in the southern part of Los Angeles. And Jim's work had worked on the basis that Bruce had picked up in terms of quadrant analysis of open, closed, functioning sort of different ways and so on. I thought the paper was fairly academic. It got a lot of interest, but it seemed to me that it was too far out in front of where the bulk of the people that were there were talking, because they were into control systems and I was into enabling. And I would still say that's true in the general run of things. But it was a significant thing to present something at a US academic conference and to be accepted as somebody to present in that sort of direction. I'm sure Bruce Juhl's name must have carried the weight that was required, but 200 or 300, OB people, all of them, major professors, and I'm still in touch with some of them, Lamar Reich and Dave Ramsey particularly, and you got to meet people who were really big names in that sort of territory and still are. People like Lyman Porter, people like the list goes on, it doesn't matter for our purposes here, but that was another kind of a shift of ground in that regard. It put some sort of credibility onto the work that I was doing in an international fashion, instead of simply just working at Victorian Institute of Colleges or Melbourne University. For me, it meant not that I was in big time, which has never been true, but somehow or other it sort of accessed the people who were in big time and connected with them. As a result of that, I've been a member of the Western Academy of Management ever since, except now. I've kind of let that fall away now, because they, like the OBTC, I think have become, academic institutional stuff. And I've presented plenty of papers at what's called WAM, the Western Academy of Management, and over the years. And what I see now coming out of all of that is they're all tiny little pinprick stuff. There's no major issues, sort of areas that I'm in touch with or that I see as being valuable to the whole of organizational behavior. I don't see much movement. I think it's going in that sort of, and then somehow or other it'll pick up at some point of time. And I think some of that pickup will be in that self-organizing area. And we're seeing some of that being written about now, which in fact 5 years ago it was never mentioned and never allowed to be mentioned and was regarded as stupid. So it's good to be a little bit ahead of other people in that regard. I think receiving a master's degree in management was probably significant, not for the right reasons. What were the reasons why it was a turning point was that it was the completion of something that I'd started a long time before. It started in 1969, this was now 1978 or 79 or something, I don't know when. I could look at the degree out there to tell me at the charter or whatever it is. But it was an interesting evening because there were 600 or 700 graduates at this thing. It was at Dallas Brooks Hall, and all of them were there, and their finery and all that kind of thing, and parents all over the place and stuff. And I was the very last on the whole show. By that time I'd left RMIT as chaplain. I worked there for 10 years. Till the end of 1976, so it must have been 77 or 78 that this investiture occurred. So I was stood up in the middle of the stage. And I don't know if there were other master's candidates. And it was before RMIT became a graduate, a doctorate awarding organisation. So it was still an institute of technology and stuff and all that kind of thing. And they talked for about 7 minutes about this person who was standing in the middle of the stage. I've never been embarrassed so much in my life. With all these people bored out of their mind listening to this stuff about, he'd been chaplain for so many years and made a huge mark and huge impression, a huge contribution to the university, and helping to set up the student union in a different fashion from what had occurred, played a part on the RMIT Council, made a phenomenal contribution amongst the students, and in particular with the God Squad and things like that, and was now pursuing an academic career. At that stage I was then attached to Melbourne University, and they expected I'd go on and do a doctorate, which I didn't. It was extraordinary, and I've never been so embarrassed in my life. It's just awful, but it was very special. The recognition of somebody doing some work in what was regarded, and the first person to have ever had a master's conferred within the RMIT schema anyway, simply by research, or only by research, was regarded as very, very hard. We had great trouble finding examiners for the thesis itself because none of them would buy that. They sort of were frightened of that. You had to do coursework largely and with a bit of research stuffed on the top of it. But anyway, it worked out eventually, and all that sort of thing. So it was really a turning point in that you then were a qualified person in this territory, as distinct from being somebody who was dabbling in it, and qualified within it as somebody that's worked on a research project, as distinct from somebody who's just passed a series of exams in terms of classwork and so on, as I saw it at least anyway. Whether other people saw it, then I don't that much know or care.